Good morning, fifth grade. Today we are in Chapter 5, Lesson 3, Problem Solving Investigation. We are going to be concentrating on the strategy of determining whether an estimate or an exact answer is needed. Let's learn the strategy. Mrs. Trainer needs to purchase a classroom response clicker and a new calculator. A clicker costs $31.99. And a calculator costs $11.75. About how much money will it cost to buy both? First of all, what do we know? Well, we know that Mrs. Trainer needs to buy a clicker for $31 and a calculator for $11.75. What do we need to find? We need to find out how much it will cost to buy both the clicker and the calculator. For step 2, how will we know whether we need to estimate or find an exact answer? The key is in the question itself. It says about how much money will it cost to buy both. When you see that word about, that means that an estimate is required. So we are going to estimate the cost of the clicker and calculator. Okay, let's solve it. Round the costs of the clicker and calculator to the nearest whole dollar. All right, well, $1 is in the ones place. So I'm going to look to the digit to the right to see if it's big enough to round up or stay the same. A 9 is definitely big enough to have the 1 round up to a 2. So 31.99 rounds up to 32. Okay, again for $11.75, we're rounding to the nearest whole dollar, so it's in the ones place, and we have to look to the digit to the right, the 7, to determine whether the 1 will round up or stay the same. The 7 is definitely large enough for the 1 to round up to a 2. So $11.75 rounds up to $12. Next, find the estimated total cost. $32 plus $12 equals $44. So Mrs. Trainer will need to spend about $44 for the 2 items. Number 4, check to see if your answer is reasonable and explain. We can estimate another way to determine if our estimate is close. So rather than rounding to the nearest whole dollar, we can round to the nearest 10. $31.99 rounded to the nearest 10 would be 30, and $11.75 rounded to the nearest 10 would be 10. 30 plus 10 is $40, which is approximately equal to 44. Let's try another example. Madison drove to her grandparents' house. They drove 58.6 miles in the first hour, 67.2 miles in the second hour, and 60.5 miles in the third hour. They followed the same route to return home. About how far did Madison's family travel? I'm going to notice, first of all, that they're using the word about, so we're looking for an estimate. But let's identify the information that we have. They're letting us know that in the first hour they drove 58.6 miles, in the second hour 67.2 miles, and in the third hour 60.5 miles. Then they followed the same route on the way home. Okay, so it's all of those on the way there and all of those on the way back. What facts do you know? The family drove 58.6 miles, 67.2 miles, and 60.5 miles. What do you need to find? The approximate distance Madison's family traveled. So let's come up with a plan. We need to estimate the number of miles traveled each hour. right? Because we're looking for about how far did they travel. So estimate the number of miles traveled each hour, add those together, and then since it says they followed the same route to return home, we need to double that amount to account for the return. Okay, let's solve. Our first job is to estimate. So now we have to determine how we are going to estimate. We could round to the nearest 1, or we could round to the nearest 10. This particular time, in part because we did rounding to the nearest 1 last time, let's go ahead and round to the nearest 10. So we're going to be asking if the digit to the right is large enough to make each of these round up, or is it going to stay the same? The 8 is definitely big enough to make the 5 round up to a 6. So 58.6 would become 60. The 7 is large enough to make the 6 round up to a 7. So 67.2 becomes 70. And the 0 is clearly not big enough to make the 6 round up. The 6 will stay the same. So let's go ahead and add those 3 together. 6 plus 6 is 12, plus 7 is 19. So on the way there, they traveled about 190 miles. However, they also traveled that same amount on the way back. So we need to add 190 plus 190, which is 380. Step 4, check to see if your answer is reasonable. Well, they drove about 60 miles each hour for about 6 hours. Okay, so since 6 times 60 equals 360, my estimate is reasonable. That concludes your direct instruction for today. Go on to page 317 and work on those word problems. Make sure you're paying attention to whether an estimate or an exact answer is needed. If you see that word about in the question, you are going to need to find an estimate. Otherwise, you're looking for an exact answer. Have a great day. See you soon.